Hey everyone, how are you today? My name is Stephanie. Welcome to my show. I don't have a name for it yet, but I'm glad you're here anyway. So, how was your weekend? How was your Halloween? Did you go out for Halloween? Did you stay in? What did you do? My sister and I took her two little ones out, and one of her older ones out. My 16-year-old niece still goes trick-or-treating, and I think that's fantastic. I actually did her makeup for Halloween, which was a lot of fun. I had not done that before. So it was a good time. I went as a plague doctor, and that was really fun, except it was really hard to see in my mask. I really don't know how the plague doctors of yore did it. I am in awe of them, to be honest with you. So I got my hair done. What do you think? Is it pretty? My hair gets to this point where, so I shaved my head at the beginning of the pandemic, and I thought it was going to be a short-lived thing, but I found out that I really like it so much because I'm just going to be real with you. I hate styling my hair. I hate coloring it. I hate all those things that women are supposed to enjoy doing. I don't enjoy. I just really don't want to be bothered. And so after I shaved my head, I was like, oh my gosh, this is amazingly liberating, and I have had no desire to go back. So when my hair gets to be like an inch long, I'm like, you know, I do have those moments where I'm like, should I keep it, you know, let it keep growing, or shave it off? And inevitably, at least so far, I've gone with shave it off. So that's what I did this morning, and it feels so good. I didn't want to do it before Halloween because it would have made it really hard. I had a thing that went under my plague doctor mask that was really tight fitting, and it would have been hard to make that work because it would not have slid over my head very easily if my head was shaved. And if you've ever shaved your head, you know what I mean. You know what I'm talking about. So anyway, what did you do for Halloween? I really do want to know. So I should say right out front, this is not a makeup tutorial video. I will be doing my makeup as I'm talking to you, but I am not going to be explaining to you step by step what I'm doing, because that's just not what this is. I am not a professional makeup artist. I don't really feel it's my place to be telling people how to do their makeup. However, if you learn something from me as you're watching, all the better. Use it. Make it yours. But this is not a tutorial. So if that's what you're here looking for, you're going to be disappointed, but I hope you'll stay and hang out with me for a while, because I like it that you're here. So today, we are going to be talking about the rake. Have you heard of the rake? Now, I'm not talking about the thing that you take out of your garage and rake your leaves and so forth and whatnot at this time of year. I am talking about the creepy humanoid creature that stands, he's tall and hairless and tends to walk around crouched down on all fours. And he is named the Rake because of his long rake-like claws. That's the rake I'm talking about. Have you heard of this? This video comes at special request. I wasn't going to talk about it, but somebody who lives with me said, can you please do the rake? So I'm doing this. And it's actually quite interesting. So the story of the rake is first reported in 1691 in a mariner's log, and we're going to be talking, I'm going to read some of that to you in a little bit here. And the rake seems to be, from what I can gather, a very menacing creature. Not so much in that he harms people directly, but he seems to freak people out so much that they end up doing things that they otherwise wouldn't do. They hurt themselves, they hurt other people, and it's not because, you know, the harm doesn't come from the rake directly interacting with them. It has something to do with this creature appearing and somehow driving the person he is appearing to act violently, either against themselves or other people. So in my research for this episode, or this video, I guess, I learned that he first appeared in 1691 in a mariner's log. That's when we first hear of this thing. And then he continued appearing. There are several journal entries and so forth down through the years of this creature appearing and speaking. Now, I don't know how he speaks. I don't know if he communicates telepathically. I don't know if he actually, there's no description available of his voice. So I'm guessing it must have something to do with like communicating mentally with the people he is appearing to. And he directs them to sometimes to leave an area and never come back. Sometimes he lets them know he's watching them. It's really creepy stuff. And this has happened multiple times over the last few centuries. There's one suicide note I read, which I'm going to read to you later, in which the person says that the rake had appeared to them in gradually more forceful ways. Like first it was just a thought, and then it was like the person became aware of a presence and so forth, and the person became so frightened by what was happening that they ended up dying by suicide because they just couldn't handle it anymore. This thing was freaking them out. So, oh, there goes my brush. Oops. So, this rake is a menacing presence is what I'm getting at. It doesn't seem like it has like any direct contact with a lot of people, but its presence is enough that people, after encountering it, have been known to do some violent things. So, have you ever heard of this? I don't know. I mean, when I first learned about the rake from my son, who believes the rake is real, I was like, whatever, you know, there's all kinds of ways to make a story appear real without it actually being real. And then the more I looked into this, the more I thought, well, I don't know, maybe there is something to this. Maybe this whole thing, I mean, here's the thing. I don't believe that we can ever really know everything that's out there in the world. I think this world is so vast and so diverse in the type of creatures it hosts that it would be kind of arrogant to say, well, that's not possible. You know, there's no way that thing is real, because there have been things that people were sure were not real, and then turns out there is some variation of it that does in fact exist. So when you're talking about the rake, I've seen videos of this creature lurking in sewers, hanging out in the woods, you know, being seen on people's trail cams. So is it real? I don't know. What I do know is I am not willing to say it isn't real. And I'm not willing to say that it can't possibly be real. So in just a few minutes, I am going to read to you some of these encounters that I read about, and you can decide for yourself. One of the encounters that I'm going to read to you happened with a family, an entire family. It started off with a woman. She and her husband were in bed, and she woke up, and she was kind of in that sleepy state, like halfway between awake and asleep, and she thought her husband had gotten out of bed. And when she reached over, though, to where he would be sleeping, there he was. So she's like, what in the world am I seeing then at the foot of my bed? And she woke him up, and he immediately saw this creature standing at the foot of their bed, and it was so terrifying for him, he screamed. And what followed was a series of events that ultimately led to the death of the woman's husband and her daughter. So again, whatever this thing is, it seems to somehow communicate with people to cause harm, either to themselves or to others. Stories like this are easy to dismiss, and I know that. And I understand that, you know, there are all kinds of myths and legends about these fantastical creatures, and people don't believe they're true, and so on and so forth. But here's the thing. We're living in a place in history, at a time in history where it is so easy to verify or debunk a thing. And I think what often starts off as efforts to debunk these things ends up being sort of a reckoning with the fact that we can't always dictate to people what their experience was. Whether it was, well, we can never dictate to people what their experience was, if we're being honest about it. It doesn't matter if we find it plausible or not. If somebody experienced something, especially something as terrifying as meeting a creature like the Rake, I'm going to go ahead and say that, at least in some aspect, what they're saying is true. Because as I discussed on one of my most recent videos, I think there's a difference between what's true and what's real. What I mean by that is, clearly, when people report an encounter with a creature, an entity, something that we don't typically encounter in our everyday, day-to-day lives. When somebody reports something like that, it's very easy to say, you know, that can't possibly be true, because it's not something that we're accustomed to. However, to them, in their minds, it's true, because they clearly encountered something. Is it the something they said it was? Well, I don't know. It wasn't my experience. I have no idea. But clearly, they encountered something. So this creature, the Rake, really freaks people out, because it doesn't seem like it is directly menacing, but it seems to really get in people's heads. Now, where did this thing come from? So, as I mentioned, the first encounter with the Rake that people are aware of was in 1691, and it was recorded in a mariner's log. And then it kind of just went away. Not the Rake itself, but just people weren't really talking about it. And then in 2003, there was a series of sightings in upstate New York, and then one isolated sighting in Idaho, of all places. I don't know what that's about. So anyway, so there's all these sightings. The local media in these areas begin to pick up on the story, and pretty soon everybody's talking about the Rake. What is this thing? Why is it hanging around in New York? You know, how is it communicating with people, and so on and so forth. And then, so you would think, oh, well, I could just go online and verify these stories by looking up the local news reports from 2003 from upstate New York. However, what happened after the media began to cover it was allegedly that the government said, you're not allowed to cover this story. And they ordered like a media blackout. And basically, all stories verifying the sightings of the Rake were scrubbed from the internet. That is why, according to the lore surrounding the Rake, that is why you cannot find anything about him in any, like, official press, official media. It's all coming from from sources that don't have credentials. It's just people who are saying, yeah, I had this encounter and I want to share it with you. Which is interesting, because that's kind of how it is with basically any cryptid out there. you're not going to have a lot of stories that are going to verify the existence of these creatures. When I was reading up on the dog man for my last video, I read up on, yeah, I was talking about the dog man in Michigan, and I'll link that video in the description. Everything that I read, everything was about hearsay. Everything was you know, neither confirming nor denying the existence of this creature, but nobody was willing to say it doesn't exist either. I mean, and everything that I read about it came from people who sent their stories of their encounters into this website or that website, and they did it simply because they had to tell somebody, and they wanted to, you know, share it with a sympathetic person or group of people who they knew would validate, or yeah, give them validation, who wasn't, you know, who weren't going to say, well, that's impossible and we don't believe you. And that tends to be the case with just about any encounters with what people would consider otherworldly or paranormal, or however you'd like to phrase it. That seems to be how it goes. These encounters are recorded by people who have found a sympathetic audience, and they share their stories accordingly. I don't know what I'm doing with my eyes, and I say that in every video, but it's true. I really don't know. I'm just kind of throwing makeup on my eyes and seeing where we end up. I do know what I'm going to do with my lipstick, though, so I'm kind of planning or winging it, I guess, accordingly. Have you ever had any encounters with the rake? And I'm already bracing myself for the clever commentary about how you raked your leaves this past weekend. Can't wait for it. It's going to be exciting. Can't wait to read all those funny comments. Have you ever had an encounter with anything that is maybe similar to the rake? And if so, what did you do? Where did this happen? Did you tell anybody? Did you write anything down? Do you have pictures? Oh, if you have pictures, that would be awesome, because one of the things with these cryptids is it is very hard to get pictures of these creatures. And we are in an age where, with information so readily available at our fingertips, it is no longer okay to just say, this thing happened to me. Now you have to be able to provide documented proof of literally everything that happens in your life. So I would hope that if you're going to come to me and say, I have encountered the rake, that you have a picture. However, even if you don't, if you have a good story, I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to believe you. Oh, okay. So I think that we're taking some shape here. I don't know. Eyes, especially with the lipstick I'm going to be wearing, which you'll see in a moment. They're a little bit dicey sometimes. Dicey eyes. I'm probably going to have to do my usual and pause rather soon, because I'm not sure which direction I'm going with this, and I don't want to just sit here and ramble in your ear while I figure it out, but we'll see. We'll hang out for a little bit longer before I pause. So the suicide note that I'm going to read to you, though, in a little bit, it's quite unsettling, because in this note from 1964, the person states that the rake has been appearing to them in, I guess you could say, like, more and more personal ways for quite some time. And it would always happen to him, I think it was a guy. It would always happen to them right when they were waking up. Like, they would catch a glimpse of it, or they would hear it. And then the final time that they woke up, they saw it standing there at the foot of their bed. And that was when it was just too much. And the reason they chose to end their life by suicide was because they had already been so traumatized by what they had experienced up to that point, that the idea of the rake doing anything more than what had already happened was so terrifying for them, they knew they didn't want to be around to see it. And another aspect of that particular note is that they left a letter for, I believe it was the sister, who they knew that the sister would be very distraught after the person died by suicide. And so they left this note letting the sister know that the rake had said her name too. And so this person was very concerned about his sister and said, you know, you have to be very careful because he's after you as well. Which is really creepy. I mean, if somebody's had this terrible experience and they're letting you know, hey, guess what? This thing that has been tormenting me just said your name. I don't know. What would you do? Would you wait around to see what's going to happen? Would you move? What would you do? It's just, I don't know what I would do. I would like to think that I would fearlessly face this rake or whatever it might be. But I don't know. I'm kind of wimpy sometimes. Like, if we're being honest, a lot of the time. And I can't really say for sure what I would do. I know what I would like to think I'd do. But what I'd like to think that I would do and what I would actually do are not always the same thing, which I know is shocking because I'm sure none of you have ever experienced that. I'm sure that whatever you say you're going to do, you actually do. Like right now, I'm actually putting color on my eyes that I don't like. I'm just going to work with it though. I'm going to make this happen. However, as per usual, I am going to pause. I'm going to pause, and when I come back, you'll get to see how I look, and we're going to read some scary, scary things, okay? So don't go anywhere. I will be right back, I promise. All right, I am back. Here's what I ended up with. I'm not loving it, but I also don't hate it. Except for this one eyelash. It's really given me some problems today. Although, considering everything happening in the world, I would say eyelashes are really the very least of my concerns. So, as promised, we are going to read some creepy things. So, grab a cup of cocoa, get comfortable, and allow me to tell you a sweet bedtime story. Or, you know, whatever. So, I told you about a suicide note from 1964 concerning the rake. This that I'm going to read to you comes from a creepypasta wiki. Wiki? I don't know. So, if this is a trigger for you, if reading this note would bother you, now is the time to leave the video. Now we continue. A suicide note from 1964. As I prepare to take my life, I felt it necessary to assuage any guilt or pain I have introduced through this act. It is not the fault of anyone other than him. For once I awoke and felt his presence, and once I awoke and saw his form, once again I awoke and heard his voice and looked into his eyes. I cannot sleep without fear of what I might next awake to experience. I cannot ever wake. Goodbye. Found in the same wooden box where this note was found were 2 empty envelopes addressed to William and Rose, and 1 loose personal letter with no envelope. Dearest Linny, I have prayed for you. He spoke your name. So, we also have a journal entry. This is translated from Spanish from 1880. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I have experienced the greatest terror. I see his eyes when I close mine. They are hollow and black. They saw me and pierced me. His wet hand. I will not sleep. His voice. And then there's some unintelligible text. I think that would be illegible, but I digress. From a witness in 2006. Oh, first, let me read this. From the Mariner's Log in 1691 that I mentioned earlier. He came to me in my sleep. From the foot of my bed, I felt a sensation. He took everything. We must return to England. We shall not return here again, at the request of the rake. All right, now this story is a bit longer. This is from 2006. 3 years ago, I had just returned from a trip from Niagara Falls with my family for the 4th of July. We were all very exhausted after a long day of driving. So my husband and I put the kids right to bed and called it a night. At about 4 a.m. I woke up thinking my husband had gotten up to use the bathroom. I used the moment to steal back the sheets, only to wake him in the process. I apologized and told him I thought he got out of bed. When he turned to face me, he gasped and pulled his feet up from the end of the bed so quickly, his knee almost knocked me out of the bed. Then he grabbed me and said nothing. After adjusting to the dark for half a second, I was able to see what caused the strange reaction. At the foot of the bed, sitting and facing away from us, there was what appeared to be a naked man, or a large hairless dog of some sort. Its body position was disturbing and unnatural, as if it had been hit by a car or something. For some reason, I was not instantly frightened by it, but more concerned as to its condition. At this point, I was somewhat under the assumption that we were supposed to help him. My husband was peering over his arm and knee, tucked into the fetal position, occasionally glancing at me before returning to the creature. In a flurry of motion, the creature scrambled around the side of the bed, then crawled quickly in a flailing sort of motion right along the bed until it was less than a foot from my husband's face. The creature was completely silent for about 30 seconds, or probably closer to 5, it just felt like a while, just looking at my husband. The creature then placed its hand on his knee and ran into the hallway, leading to the kids' rooms. I screamed and ran for the light switch, planning to stop him before he hurt my children. When I got to the hallway, the light from the bedroom was enough to see it crouching and hunched over about 20 feet away. He turned around and looked directly at me, covered in blood. I flipped the switch on the wall and saw my daughter Clara. The creature ran down the stairs while my husband and I rushed to help our daughter. She was very badly injured and spoke only once more in her short life. She said, "He is the Rake." My husband drove his car into the lake that night while rushing our daughter into the hospital. They did not survive. Being a small town, news got around pretty quickly. The police were helpful at first, and the local newspaper took a lot of interest as well. However, the story was never published, and the local television news never followed up either. For several months, my son Justin and I stayed in a hotel near my parents' house. After we decided to return home, I began looking for answers for myself. I eventually located a man in the next town over who had a similar story. We got in contact and began talking about our experiences. He knew of 2 other people in New York who had seen the creature we now referred to as the Rake. It took the 4 of us about 2 solid years of hunting on the internet and writing letters to come up with a small collection of what we believed to be the accounts of the Rake. None of them gave any details, history, or follow-up. One journal had an entry involving the creature on its first 3 pages, and then never mentioned it again. A ship's log explained nothing of the encounter, saying only that they were told to leave by the Rake. That was the last entry in the log. There were, however, many instances where the creature's visit was one of a series of visits with the same person. Multiple people also mentioned being spoken to, my daughter included. This led us to wonder if the Rake had visited any of us before our last encounter. I set up a digital recorder near my bed and left it running all night, every night, for 2 weeks. I would tediously scan through the sounds of me rolling around in my bed each day when I woke up. By the end of the 2nd week, I was quite used to the occasional sound of sleep while blurring through the recording at 8 times the normal speed. This took almost an hour every day. Okay, first of all, I'm just going to side note, this is a completely unbelievable story because I don't believe anybody gets almost 8 hours of sleep every day. Carrying on. On the first day of the 3rd week, I thought I heard something different. What I found was a shrill voice. It was the Rake. I can't listen to it long enough to even begin to transcribe it. I haven't let anyone listen to it. All I know is that I've heard it before, and I now believe that it spoke when it was sitting in front of my husband. I don't remember hearing anything at the time, but for some reason, the voice on the recorder immediately brings me back to that moment. The thoughts that must have gone through my daughter's head make me very upset. I have not seen the Rake since he ruined my life, but I know that he has been in my room while I slept. I know in fear that one night I'll wake up to see him staring at me. Dun dun dun. So those are accounts from people who have supposedly encountered this rake. Now, is it real? I'm going to tell you the truth about that because I have it. Believe it or not, I have the truth about the rake. So the rake is, as you probably guessed from what I just read, part of a genre of horror online called creepypasta. And the creepypasta is things like like Slender Man, he's part of a creepypasta. The rake is part of a creepypasta. Now some would argue, how do you know it's not real though? Like I said earlier, I don't know that it's not real. What I do know is that the rake had its beginnings, as many things today have their beginnings, as many horrible things have their beginnings. It started on 4chan. Now, the way 4chan operates is still a mystery to me because I've never been there. But as we know, 4chan is very adept at getting people to act as a collective and get certain things trending. And the rake is no different. Now, the only thing that makes the rake different is that the level of detail provided in constructing this, what has now become an urban legend, was so significant and made it really easy to add to the story. However, I will read to you an excerpt from this article. It says, "The rake's invention was so well documented that we even have some notes of the creature's creation. For example, we know that the group originally toyed with several different names for their new terror, including Operation Crawler. As time went on, the monstrosity began to resemble what we know today as the rake. And this is a quote from 4chan. Here's what we've got so far. Humanoid, about 6 feet tall when standing, but usually crouches and walks on all fours. It has very pale skin. The face is blank, as in no mouth and no nose. However, it has 3 solid green eyes, one in the middle of its forehead, and the other 2 on either side of its head toward the back. Usually seen in front yards and suburban areas, usually just watches the observer, but will stand up and attack if approached. When it attacks, a mouth opens up as if a hinged skull that opens at the chin, revealing many tiny but dull teeth." And that tracks pretty well with what we've read about these supposed encounters, that the rake doesn't really, it's not aggressive, but apparently it will attack if you are aggressive with it. Basically, it just stands there and stares you down, occasionally communicating with you, apparently telepathically, because the presence of the mouth, from what I'm seeing in the photos, is, well, it's there, but nobody has recorded or has reported any sound of its voice. So I don't know if anybody's actually heard it, other than the woman who was recording while she slept, or if it's just so horrifying they just have not been able to describe it. So this happened in, let me see here. It doesn't say what year, but regardless of the year. So 4chan, these people on 4chan had decided they were going to create a new creature. They started putting stories out there with such detail that it was very easy to add to it, and you know, it seemed convincing. However, the rake is fake. It is not real. Photos of it are doctored. That has not stopped people from talking about it. That has not stopped people from reporting alleged encounters. Now, the question then becomes, why do we still talk about things when we know they're not real? The rake is a classic example of something that we know isn't real, but it's taken hold of our collective psyche. And there are some people that just cannot accept that this isn't real. I have a few different ideas about that. As I discussed in my video about conspiracy theories, I think one of the things is people want to feel like they belong to a larger collective. They belong to a community. One way to do that is to believe, you know, is to align yourself with beliefs regarding things that seem like privileged information or secret knowledge that only the few have, or only the few people are smart enough to understand that it's real. I think there's a lot of that in this. It's also just really good storytelling. People love a good story. And if you have a story that has such a great framework like the Rake does, I mean, they, you know, the 4chan users really made sure that the Rake had a lot of detail in the story so that it was plausible. Because if you were to just put something out on the internet that said, hey, I saw this creepy creature, it freaked me out a little bit and it appeared to be bald, and some people might be thinking, well, was it Stephanie? Because you didn't give enough detail. It could have been me, you don't know. But no, 4chan users really made sure to fill out the details about this creature so that anybody hearing it would think, well, it's plausible. I mean, you're giving me a physical description, you're telling me where this happened, you're giving me dates. I mean, I'm not going to dismiss it because you've just given me all this information. So it makes it easy to tack on more information and make it appear as factual, which is what creepypastas are. It's something that people, you know, can talk to or talk about and relate to and add to, and it just kind of takes on a life of its own. And that certainly has happened with the Rake. It is now essentially the thing of urban legends that people can neither confirm nor deny, because as I said, I believe that there are all kinds of things out there that we would dismiss as untrue when in fact there is an element of truth to them, even if what they really are is not exactly what people are saying they are. And I think that's the case with the Rake. I think that's the case with a lot of things. It also, I think, helps us process things. And I've said this before too. I think that believing in these cryptids, or believing in ghosts, or believing in these unseen entities that sometimes interact with us, whether there's a factual basis to them or not, I think they also help people process difficult things. They help give order to a world that seems incredibly disordered, especially right now. There's so much going on right now that is beyond our control. And latching on to something like the Rake enables people to make sense of the world that they're living in. Even if it's in a scary way, it still makes sense. It still provides order, even if it's not something that you'd prefer to encounter. It's still giving you something to hang all of your fears and so forth on, and it gives it a name and a face, and it's helpful to process things. And I think finally, people just like to be scared. And I think that's especially true in times when things are difficult. People enjoy a good scare. I know I do. And especially if I'm stressed out, I love watching things that are scary, because it doesn't, somehow it's like very therapeutic for me, because maybe it's because it makes my problems seem smaller. I don't know. I just know that when I'm really stressed out, I will like to watch things that provide a really strong emotional response and that really scare me, or at least disturb me. And it helps. It helps bring me out of that worrisome state of mind. So there you have the truth about the Rake. It started as something on 4chan, took on a life of its own, and now there is debate as to whether or not it's real. I mean, there are videos out there, but anybody who has enough skill could create that video pretty easily. So, and that's another thing is, you know, with all the technology we have available to us, it's so easy to be a skeptic and to become cynical, because in an era where we can make basically anything seem real, it's hard to, it's at the same time hard to dismiss things, but also hard to accept them as truth. And I think that's where we get into the whole conspiracy theory thing, and that's why people are so fascinated by them, because there's that element of having knowledge that makes you just a little bit smarter than everyone else. And then you end up with things like Pizzagate, or Michael Jackson is still alive, and by the way, I saw Elvis. So yeah, it's just kind of its own thing. But these creepypastas are fascinating to me. There is a movie that was made in 2018 called The Rake. My son and I are actually going to watch it tonight. And it was made by Sony Studios, which also made the movie Slender Man, which was so bad I had to turn it off. So we're not setting our hopes too high. We know it's probably going to be terrible, but sometimes it's fun to watch really awful movies. It just is. Bad movies for life, baby. So what are your thoughts? I want to know. And if you're familiar with the Rake at all, you probably knew from early on where this was going, but for some people this might have been a fun little journey into the creepypasta that is the Rake and everything that comes with it. So what are your thoughts? I really do want to know. Yeah, okay. I don't even know what I was going to say next, so we're just going to end this. All right, so I hope you're having a great day so far. I hope this video was entertaining to you. If you enjoyed the video, please like, please subscribe, and share it. Also, if you enjoy the content I provide, the way that I bring a little something extra to your day, please consider joining me on Patreon so that I can continue bringing these videos to you and I can make them even better. I appreciate you so much. Thanks for watching. Thanks for sharing. Thanks for subscribing. I have so much fun doing this, and especially tomorrow is the election in the United States, and it would be an understatement to say everybody's a little stressed. So anything that we can do to bring some levity to the day, to help people just forget for a little bit, or maybe make people really grateful for things like the fact that the Rake isn't real. I mean, what a gift is that? You're not going to walk out into the woods and see this 6-foot-tall, hairless humanoid with rake-like fingers coming after you. It's really a really good thing. So anyway, have a great day. Take good care of yourselves. Be good to each other. Don't should on yourself. Don't should on anyone else. And if you're in the United States and you're an eligible voter and you have not voted yet, please go out and vote tomorrow. Your vote really does matter, and we're at a critical point in this nation's development and history that we need everyone out there voting. So take care of yourselves, and I will talk with you again really, really soon. Bye.